Hey everybody, it's Ed. Are you confused yet? I am. There's a whole lot of crazy stuff going on in the digital computing and e-ink space. And I think that today I'm going to react to two things, two technologies, one that's already out, one that's on the horizon, and kind of try and cut through the noise and the chaos and see if we can have a little bit of a conversation about what these might mean for the market. One has actually hit the market. The other is about to, hopefully, within the next couple of months. But stick with me and we will get into this. I will see you in just a second. Okay, so let's take a look at these two technologies that I was talking about. First of all, we're going to jump into the Daylight DC1 computer. Now, it's interesting. It's being billed as an e-paper device. So they're calling it live paper. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. But I felt I needed to have some kind of a conversation with you on this because Kit has covered this, Kit Beds Masters, Rants on Tech has covered this. But the only full review I've seen so far is by Joshua Chang. And I'll link all of this in the description down below so that you can see what they're saying about all of this. But I think it's important that we have the conversation about this technology because it is different and it is innovative. And one thing that's kind of neat is they've got a really slick website. Now, the marketing has changed a little bit. They started out by comparing it to e-ink directly, which I think was a mistake. I think comparing this type of technology, which is an LCD technology, to e-ink is a little disingenuous. But we'll talk about a little bit of why they were able to do that. And I think it's because there are some direct comparisons, and I want to be fair to the company with that. I have reached out and asked them to see if I can get a review device. So if you're interested in seeing my take on this device, feel free to reach out to the company. I'll drop that into the description below as well so that you can maybe reach out to them and say, hey, we'd like this person to get a device. They have my contact information. We're just waiting to see if they'll send that out. But one thing, and I've got their website pulled up here, and I want to show you this because I think it was really slick marketing the way they did it. They kind of walk you through a story. And if you're familiar with digital storytelling, it's all about that experience. It's all about telling the story through visuals and through timing and through what you have the user interact with. You'll notice that there's no traditional homepage here. There's these little hash marks, and you can try and drag this slider if you want, but it doesn't work quite as well. Instead, what you get is if you scroll down, and hopefully this is coming through really well on the screen, you see the light change with the device at the heart of it. It's very smart the way they've done this. And so you see all the different pieces of day. So before you can go on to look at anything else, you're kind of guided through, some might say forced through, but guided through this changing of the day to see what the device would look like in different conditions. It's really kind of slick. And then, of course, obviously they'll let you order right away, but we're not going to do that. But as you go down, it tells the story. It gives you some more information. It talks about reducing screen time, reducing distractions, making sure that you are able to read outside, all of these things that you're not being exhausted by sitting in front of a screen all day. And then as you go down more, they're saying, here's a healthy alternative. And we'll kind of go through some of this really quickly. But the idea is that this, in their eyes, is like e-ink, only better because it's quicker, it's snappier, it's got a 60 frame per second refresh rate, and it zooms in a lot of all the animations. All of those things happen in a much more natural way, in the way we're used to seeing them, but also in a stripped down version of Android like e-ink in many cases, although not the books platforms. But this is supposed to give you that balance. But as we go through, you'll see they show all the different use cases: reading, note-taking, writing. They tell you you can use your apps because it is built on Android 13. And then they show that it's portable. And it's really kind of an interesting way to tell a story on a website. And then again, they'll show you the extended battery life. And one thing on battery life, and we'll get to the tech specs here in a minute, but they talk about this huge battery life. Well, for comparison, they say they don't give an actual estimate that I saw, but days worth of battery. Well, it's got a whopping 8,000 milliamp battery in this device. For perspective on that, my Supernote Nomad has a 2,700 milliamp battery. Almost 3.5 times the battery is in this daylight computer. So it is going to have a good battery life for what it is, which is an LCD black and white screen. But so let's go ahead through the site. Again, we're blowing down. They're doing that day, night, kind of that change to show you all the different things. Now, once you've gone through the whole story, and this is why it's slick marketing, then you get to the learn more button. Then you can see, and there's a whole nother story. You know, what does it do? How does it look? It goes through that again. But at the bottom, you finally get to see what is the package that you get for the daylight. What are the things that are included in the box? And, you know, it tells you here's the case. Here is the action buttons on the device itself. Extended battery life. Again, they're really throwing this as a computer with multiple day battery life, which is something you don't see. So they're really trying to double down on that. The stylus. So you get the stylus, which is Wacom. So that's very interesting. This is not an active stylus or a capacitive stylus. This is a Wacom EMR device, which means you could theoretically take any pen that's Wacom enabled, with the exception of the Supernote pens with that ceramic nib, and use that on this device. Now, when you get down to what it is, it's comparable. It's a little bit bigger than the Supernote A5X. I think it may be a little bit smaller than what we're guessing that the A5X2 is going to be, because some rumors have that being a 10.65 e-ink screen. And if that's the case, this would come in just a little bit below that and a little bit above the other. But when you look at this, they call it live paper. And other reviewers have covered this, and if you look in below, you'll see that the big deal about live paper in their discussion of it is it's a transflective LED screen. So you can light this device at night with the backlight, and it can also use ambient light. So the idea is you can be outside and you can use sunlight in order to be able to read this device, which eliminates glare, allows you basically to be able to use this like you would a Kindle or like you would another e-ink device. It's got 190 DPI, which quite frankly is a little underwhelming considering what we're talking about in the e-ink space with some of the PPIs that are now approaching 300. Right here on the Nomad, it's 300 DPI screen. Even on the first generation X series of the Supernote, it was 207 PPI. A lot of the books devices are right in that 200 to 300 range. So really, your resolution is not being rated as high. Now, with the other specs, it is going to be quite a bit more than an e-ink device, quite frankly, because it needs to run a lot more things. Again, you can see it doesn't have any blue light. It's only amber. It has an EMR stylus that comes with it. 8 gigabytes of RAM. That's double what you'll find on the Nomad and a lot of the other devices in the e-ink space. Storage, pretty good, 128 gigabytes. Again, for an e-ink tablet, that's very good. For something like this, that's supposed to be a computer replacement in some ways, that's not a ton of storage, but it is adequate. It's an octa-core GPU. The A5X2 has a quad core. Again, you're not running as many things. And then that 8,000 milliamp battery, which is just huge. And you see your normal things like Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth, USB-C. You do have a micro SD card slot, which they don't tell us quite how much that's going to be. Like, is it expandable up to 1 terabyte, 2 terabytes? What does the expansion slot hold? On the Nomad, it's 2 terabytes. And a lot of your companies have gone to two as kind of the standard. But either way, plenty of storage depending on what you're doing with the device. Now, one thing that's a little interesting here is that it's got Android 13, it says here in the tech specs. But when you actually go back and you look at the software, they give you this introducing Sol OS. And, the idea is it's a distraction free skin on top of Android 13. Now, I know it may be a distinction without a difference in some ways, but they say it's distraction free, but then they also, if you go back to this other page, and if we can get all the way back to and through the story, you'll see that it says with all the apps you need. Now, they don't really tell you whether or not they restrict your apps and don't give you full access to the Google Play Store. My guess is that they probably do. And I would think a lot of that would have to do with the fact that, they're trying to be distraction free. So the Daylight computer, the jury's still out. The review I saw was very balanced by Joshua Chang. I definitely suggest you click on that below in the description. It's well worth a watch. He did a great job of talking about the pros and cons of this. And I think that until you get it in your hand and kind of look at it, it's hard to really give it a full due. The problem, and this is what I think is the biggest barrier to entry for me, if this was like super interesting to me, it was one of the coolest things I'd ever seen, and I like the Supernote I bought sight unseen. I watched a lot of reviews first, but the Supernote at the time for the A5X when I bought it was right at $500 for the pen, the case, and the device itself. So you got all of that package for about $500. The Nomad you can get all in for a little over $400 for the whole package. The device itself is only $300, $299 plus tax. You could theoretically, if you already owned a Supernote device or even just had a stylus you already like, you could just buy the device itself, use any Wacom EMR, and go to town. So for $300, you could jump in and buy the Supernote. With this is they're selling, at least right now, I haven't been able to find anything other than this Founders package. And now in the Founders package, you do get the device, you do get the stylus, and you do get the cover. So you get a full package, but the cost is $729 US. That's huge. So I think, for something like this, it's a brand new technology in some ways. I mean, the underlying technology, I believe was around in the early 2000s, but it's become popular now with some of the new monitors you see and some of the things that have been coming out lately. But this is new. This is the idea to compete with e-ink using real raw computing technology in a very similar way to those types of platforms. Because let's face it, you're not going to watch video on this. You're just not, unless you're into monochrome. But you might surf websites. You definitely could read. You definitely could open your Kindle apps and your Kobo apps. And it frees you from a lot of the ecosystem issues, kind of the reason I like the Supernote. And I also think the books devices, having the full Google Play experience, Big Me as well, are interesting because they break you out of that Kindle Kobo ecosystem. I do have a Kobo. I love it. It's fabulous. But again, being able to read on one device, multiple platforms is really cool. That's the first thing is that we're going to talk about tech-wise in this video is the Daylight. And maybe I gave you a few tips, at least hopefully I pointed you in the direction of some people who are talking in the space and really providing information on this new technology, because I do think that the company deserves a lot of kudos for doing something different. And from what I can see and from the review, at least it looks like the software and hardware are thought out. It doesn't appear to be, from the review that I saw, that it is half baked. This device seems to be a full package at launch, and that's really cool. So kudos to them for making an innovative product, for taking a different approach, for using this storytelling way of going through the website. I think all of that is really interesting. It doesn't make me want to pay $729 to buy the device just so I can review it. I'm happy to review it and then send it back, or anything else that I can do to really help get the word out on whether this device truly tracks as a good device or not. But that's my take on the Daylight. The second thing that I want to talk about, and that I think is really important, is the Supernote A5X2. So for those of you who are in the Reddit community with the A5X2 or with Supernote, you know that Supernote is very transparent. They have talked about whether it's manufacturing delays, whether it is shipping delays, chip changes, when COVID was really impacting supply chain, and when they were on lockdown, quite frankly, they were telling their story and really trying to engage the community so that as a Supernote owner, I didn't feel like I was being kept in the dark. But two of the biggest things they do are the roadmap. I think the roadmap on Trello is fabulous. I've seen so many of those items implemented over the last 3 years of ownership that it's amazing that they keep doing that. And the other thing is that even if it's something small and they have a chance to show it, they throw it out on Reddit to the community and even link it back to their website. So I went from the website to the Reddit post from the official channel to this image. Now, some of you may have been pulled into this conversation. And if you're new here, please subscribe. Love to have you join the community. If you're not new here, you probably follow some of the same people I do, and you've seen this image. On the left is the original A5X, which is my device of choice. This is what I've had for 3 years. I love it. I did a long-term review video on it. I'll link that above. Check it out if you haven't seen it. Love that device. Absolutely love it. The A5X2 is supposed to have similar specs to the A6X2, which is another device that I absolutely love. It's too small for me to do some of the things on it that I want to do, which is why I'm really excited about the new form factor coming out. I think what you're going to see in the A5X2 is enhancing what was great about the A5X, which is the size and the footprint. And they're also talking about that slightly larger screen, which I think primarily is going to be due to the change in design. And let me see if I can get this a little closer to the camera for you on the A6X2. This device is very symmetrical. You have the top and bottom bezel are the same size as each other, and the side bezels with the swipe bars are the same size. What's interesting about that approach is that it gives you a little bit more screen real estate than you had on the original A5X. So if you look at the A5X, but you'll notice here that this bottom bezel is quite a bit thicker than the top bezel. Now, I think that was primarily so you could hold it almost like a book with both hands and read it, which I think is pretty cool and pretty smart, but it leaves a little bit of room for more screen real estate. And by making that equidistant between the two, you still don't lose that ability to hold, but it allows for a little bit more in the vertical to be able to see that. Now, Voya did an excellent comparison. He's way more savvy when it comes to Photoshop and some of these things than I am. So I'm not going to go through that comparison, but I do want to talk about a couple of things here. And I'll link Voya's video on this in the description, and also Kit Masters and Rants for Tech, because they've all talked about this quite a bit. But what I see here, and what's really interesting to me, is this idea of the half folio design. Now, there's been some criticism on Reddit, and I kind of agree, but at the same time, I'm also a little bit. I see where Supernote's going. The idea is to go thin. And in Voya's video, he tries to take some measurements between the two devices and then do a comparison and figure out what possible distance is as far as thinness. And whatever it was that he came out with was less than the remarkable as far as actual width on this device. If that's the case, it may be that Supernote is trying to rival the Remarkable for the world's thinnest tablet. And if that happens, I think you'll really see something move in the market, because Remarkable has held that moniker for a long time. But this idea of the half folio. Now, here's the criticism. One nice thing about having the folio the way it is here, if you look on the left, for the A5X, the original version, is that you see it overhangs a little bit. It goes over both at the top and the bottom, and it goes all the way around. And of course, you have your pin loop. And that provides a layer of protection. And I think that's something that's very important. Now, one thing, this is going to be a more hardy device anyway because it's plastic, not aluminum. It does have a glass screen. I know some people think that the glass is also plastic, and it's not. I believe the original Remarkable was plastic, and maybe even the original Supernotes were plastic. I don't know. I've never actually looked up my A5X. On this one, it is a glass screen with, and the A6X2 actually is a glass screen with that Feel Right 2 self-healing film on it. And that helps with anti-glare and everything else. I'm assuming, and this is a big assumption. Now remember, we don't know. We don't really know what this device is exactly going to look like. We've heard rumors, and Supernote has said that it's going to be very similar spec-wise to the A6X2. We know it's going to employ that semi-folio design, which you kind of see here, and it looks like it's more flush with the device itself. You can kind of see it looks like here on this back edge that it wraps around. And I don't know if it wraps around and then does something similar to what I've seen where you could remove part of the device on one side and you could basically put the slip cover in that way. Or if they're going to do some kind of magnet. What you lose here, at least from the visual, is the protective case itself. And I think that's where you could really run into some issues with long-term users. The nice thing about the original case is I can shove this in my bag, in my briefcase, and I don't have to worry. The pin loop keeps the pin right where it is. The case closes and wakes the device very well. It holds everything in place. It's easy to reach in and grab. I'm a little concerned, and I know I probably shouldn't be. I was concerned about the magnets on the A6X2, and I was wrong. The magnets are phenomenal. I actually think they're an upgrade to the mechanical rail you had in the A5X. I think they work very well. I should have learned a long time ago not to be too doubtful of the engineering folks at Supernote. They seem to really know what they're doing. But I am concerned because this is a departure in a very functional way from the way a lot of us use these devices. So hopefully they get it right to where it holds really well, but you are missing the pin loop. So what am I going to do with my pen now? Now, I always keep an ink pen on me just in case I have to sign something on paper. I never take a note on paper anymore. But the idea that now I'll have to carry my Heart of Metal or my click pen. And don't get me wrong, I love the Heart of Metal. Nobody'd know it wasn't a pen. I'd put it in my pocket and it would be there. I'd pull it out and I'd use it on my tablet. But what if I forget it? Or what if it's not handy? Or what if I do throw it in my bag and it gets lost down in the bag? I've got my tablet, but now I'm looking for my pen. It could just be a little crazy. I really think they were smart to have this elegant, what I consider an elegant solution for the pen. It's old school in a lot of ways. It's not magnetic. It doesn't stick to the side. It doesn't risk falling off. It's just that one loop that's self sustaining, stitched on to the cover, and it works very nicely. Now, again, this is all conjecture. Maybe there's something attachable. Maybe underneath this or on top of this, they're going to have some kind of a loop or a magnetic clasp. I don't know. Just like you all, I don't know. But I am excited about this piece of technology. And I think that the reason I'm so excited and that I'm concerned and that I lump these two things together, the daylight and the e ink, or specifically in this case, the A5X2, is that they're different technologies designed for different things. If you want a low distraction computer that has a lot of power and can read a lot faster and you can read at night with and you can do more things on, the daylight sounds interesting. And as a concept, I'd like to see more of it and more about it and really learn what is important about that. The Supernote is a different use case entirely. It's a note taker. So the idea is to take good notes on it. You do that in well lighted conditions. It doesn't have a front or a backlight, and it really feels like you're writing on a bed of paper with a pen, a ballpoint pen to be specific. And I think that's, and from the everything we're hearing, it may be a little bit bigger of a canvas. Not much, just an inch and a half, but an inch and a half can mean a lot in this space. So I think that when you compare these two things and you look at how they're being positioned in the market, I think that Supernote has been kind of plagued by some of these delays. It would have been interesting to see if they'd have come out with this when they were originally going to. It would have hit the market right before or at the same time as the daylight. That would have been a really interesting comparison to have both of those devices in your hands at the same time with reviewers to really talk about them and get deep into why is it advantageous to have e-ink over this LCD monochrome computer, or in the reverse. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the daylight is the new thing. These huge batteries that are able to be spread over a longer distance, computing power that allows you to do a lot of different things. But I don't know that you're ever going to quite get the feel, the latency, and some of the other things. All right, that was my discussion on two new technologies that I almost felt like I had to do. I think that there's been so much discussion in this space, and with everyone getting so interested in some cases for products they don't even have in their hands yet, including me. I have been a big fan of Supernote. I don't hide it. I think that it's a device that served me well for what I've asked it to do in my life, and it's really done a lot for me in that way. At the same time, you've got people in the space really excited about daylight and some very skeptical. So there is a mixed bag there. I think I fall into the camp of cautiously optimistic at this point. I think there may be a real space for a technology like that. I do not think it's for the computer user. I don't necessarily know that it's a laptop replacement. I think Books is trying to fill that space with e-ink, and for some people, it kind of works. But I really don't think it's there yet. The same as with the color technology itself. So, but this could be a device, the Daylight, that fills a gap, kind of, in my estimation, similar to what the Supernote does in some ways, between going full on Books, Android, full App Store, and Remarkable, which is very, very distraction free and kind of wraps you in their ecosystem and tries to keep you in a box. And don't get me wrong, all of those approaches, there's nothing wrong with them. Whatever fits you makes the most sense in your world. And I think we need to really think about it that way. But that might be where daylight is headed. They're like, we know that distractions happen all the time. We know that the OLED screens and the LED screens are hard on your eyes. And so here's another approach. Here's a different way to do that with some of the same animation capabilities and flow and refreshes that you're used to from a regular computer. So again, very interesting concept. Supernote is going even further into what they do best, which is we're not going to give you full Android because that's not what we think our device should be. But we're going to give you tools that can maximize your productivity and that can maybe help you stay organized in a different way. And I think if these two companies really kind of find and learn how to communicate that niche very well, and the A5X2 comes out fairly timely, you'll see some real stiff competition to the Bookses, to the Remarkables, to the Amazon Kindles, quite frankly, Big Me and others that are, it's starting to, it's not a cluttered space. It's still a niche market, but becoming more mainstream. People are starting to take notice. So anyway, thank you for sticking with me through the end. Hopefully you did. If you didn't, go back, watch some more parts, come back again, and we'll try and get you to watch the whole video next time. But in the meantime, please please subscribe. I'm approaching the 850 mark on subscribers. We're approaching 80,000 views, well over 2,000 people tuning into multiple videos. If you're one of them, go ahead, hit the subscribe button. It'll help me a ton, and I would really appreciate it. As I always like to say, we live in a changing world, and all you need to be a change agent in this world is to bring yourself and your perspective to the table. Have a great day, everybody. I'll see you soon.